be meeting in the parlor, but it's also for faith formation or Sunday school and also for lunch. And so if you would like to take part in that, then I have a sign-up sheet that you can either see me and I'll try to put it in the back for you to do that. We would love to have a lot of different ages join us for that so that we can get the right information sent in. So it's a Sunday lift, a luncheon, and Sunday school in 2 weeks from today. Thanks.
And we will also have an announcement for us.
Good morning. I'm here on behalf of the Social Action Mission Committee. Back in December, 3 of us from Trinity participated in the Bridges Out of Poverty training. Bridges Out of Poverty is jointly sponsored by United Way and Community Action. It is a framework for understanding differing socioeconomic status. The workshop strives to create an understanding of poverty and of building of resources. And it's meant to help us establish what is needed to build sustainable communities. It is our hope that you will be moved to register for the next training. There will be some information on the back table that looks like this, explaining the Bridges upcoming training on April 25th, Thursday. You all are invited. I urge you to be prepared. Perhaps you may want to be a volunteer, joining one of our mission programs like Back Bay Mission or Pine Ridge Mission, or help out at the breakfast program. This training will help you to guide you in your conversations and your relationships. Kevin today is going to help us understand some of the issues that are presented at the training. He's going to share a short video with the congregation to give us an introduction to what you might find at the program. Thank you and hope to see you there.
Are there any announcements, any other announcements from the congregation? Oh, yes.
Videos play.
Oh, sorry. All right. us to Jesus simply into our hearts and minds during this time of worship. God has come to us in Jesus Christ, devoting our souls to his ways of truth and justice.
And I'd just like to say a great big thank you to all of those people that donated coats and jackets today. You might see them laying on the sides of the pews. We're supposed to put them on the floor. When Jesus rode into Jerusalem, people laid them down with the palms. I didn't want us walking on them. I didn't think that was safe. But thank you so much for people who donated those. We will be having them to go out to people who are in need. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And let's have a round of applause for that, please. Let's joyfully sing Hosanna, La Hosanna.
Please join me in the gathering prayer. God of grace, you are coming to set right what is wrong, to raise up the oppressed, to bestow good things on the poor. Teach us to live within your upside-down kingdom. We gather together in the name of Jesus, who welcomes the stranger, dine with the outcasts, heal the sick, and call for compassion. Jesus showed us how to live in your love. Amen.
Did they go?
All right. How are you guys doing today? What do you have in your hand there? What is that? You know? It's a palm branch. Because today is Palm Sunday. It's a day that Jesus came into Jerusalem and he waved just like you're doing now. And everybody was happy to see Jesus. excited that, look, what do we have here in the sanctuary today? It's not normal here on the pews. What is it? This is called a pew, what is it? On these front benches. And what are these? Why are these all here? Somebody forget their coat? Yeah. Why do you think we have those there? You know? Because we give away a lot of coats. Because during the winter it's very cold. And some people don't have anything. They don't even have a coat. And so when they come and they don't have a coat on, it's cold weather, we let them pick out a coat so they can go out and be warm. And that's pretty cool. So all these people brought in coats because when Jesus came into Jerusalem, they threw their coats on the ground so that Jesus' donkey wouldn't get stuck in the mud. He rode in on a donkey. And people ran to the trees and they pulled those off the tree and they were waving them because they were so happy to see Jesus. So it's always good for us to greet one another and be happy to see one another. And everybody here today has a palm branch, and a little bit later they'll be waving them. Did you guys see them wave those palm branches during the music? Okay, well they do that. There they go. There they go. See? That means that we really love Jesus and we're glad to see him come to town. So before you guys go, enjoy your palm branch and let's have a word of prayer. Almighty God, it's a good thing to gather in your house today among your people. We thank you for the love that is here among us, for the care that's given to everyone, especially these children. And we ask on behalf of all of us in the congregation to bless these children in a special way. Help them to experience all the wonders of this life and to live in the light of your love. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. Okay, thanks for coming up today.
Our scripture lesson this morning is taken from Luke 19, 28 to 40, and it's from the New Revised Standard Version. And if you would like to join me in the full print, that would be good. After he had said this, he went on ahead, going up to Jerusalem. When he had come near Bethphage and Bethany, at the place called the Mount of Olives, he sent two of the disciples, saying, "Go into the village ahead of you, and as you enter it, you will find tied there a colt that has never been ridden. Untie it and bring it here. If anyone asks you, 'Why are you untying it?' just say this, 'The Lord needs it.'" So those who were sent found the colt as Jesus had told them. As they were untying the colt, its owners asked them, "Why are you untying the colt?" They said, "The Lord needs it." Saying, "Do I have that mixed up yet?" Okay. Then they brought it to Jesus, and after throwing their cloaks on the colt, they set Jesus on it. As he rode along, people kept spreading their cloaks on the road. As he was now approaching the path down from the Mount of Olives, the whole multitude of the disciples began to praise God joyfully with a loud voice for all the deeds of power that they had seen, saying, "Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord, peace in heaven and glory in earth." Some of the Pharisees in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, order your disciples to stop." He answered, "I tell you, if these people were silent, the stones would shout out." Let's
it on?
No.
Testing. I just want to thank everyone for all the food donations. I believe we have all the food that we need, and that's very important. Need to make the casseroles Saturday morning and the fruit salads. That's all taken care of. What we really need the most is help that day. And there's 3 different shifts. We can't do it without enough help. We need, and I counted like between 14 and 16 volunteers per shift. So that we can have Easter breakfast together. So we can pass this around, and this will kind of be like you sign up, and once your job is done, what do we say, Kevin? It's all other duties as assigned.
Other duties.
Right. But even if it's just for that time frame, if we can just have your help for that, we'd really appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to breakfast with you. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Leanne. Melissa never liked to give announcements. She didn't like to speak publicly. That's exactly the same thing that Leanne said to me before church. And I said, well, it's important. So thanks, Leanne, for getting over that fear of speaking. So today, I want to talk about the most enthusiastic and the wildest celebration in history. I'm not talking about Jesus' triumphal entry, but I want you to start to think about triumphal entries in particular. And where else do we see people losing themselves in the moment? Where else do we see people engaged in their whole being in enthusiasm for a group of people? Game over. I'm sure many of you have seen this. And now, I want to show you a picture of someone that is widely admired. Oh, I thought it was Jesus. No, it's Napoleon. How many of you have seen this famous painting? This is, I think, Napoleon crossing the Alps. There are statues of this great moment in history. And look at, it's got Bonaparte on the stone down there. Boy, somebody even carved his name in before he came. And they prepared the way. Look at the storm in the background. And he's standing firm, and he's ready to go into battle. That has become an iconic painting of someone entering a new place, right? So I want to show you another pilgrimage site. This huge Arc de Triomphe in France. Now, why would you build something like that? Because you want people to notice, right? You want people to be impressed. You want a monument, isn't that kind of like so your name is told throughout history kind of thing? Napoleonic Arc de Triomphe. So they took this stuff very seriously. Now, I'm going to show you a picture of the most powerful man in the world. In Jesus' day, anyway. And that was the Caesars. So Caesar was the star of the show, right, when he'd come home. He was a victor, and when we talk about the triumphal entry of Jesus, I don't think Jesus had an angel. Caesar has an angel holding up his crown in this relief, which in fact these were very popular in ancient Rome. There are some of these sold as antiquities. So what did Jesus ride into Jerusalem on? A little donkey. And what was the other feature that Scripture says about it? It had never been ridden. Okay? Would you want to ride a little donkey that had never been ridden before? What would that look like as he was trying to get through the gates of Jerusalem? This guy's got, what, 4 or 5 strong horses that have been powerfully trained for the military. He's got his friends around him with their swords. They actually are leading slaves into town, which was a big feature of Roman conquering. That was to bring slaves from other places to to sell and to have them work as servants in town, and everybody liked it. Caesar was a big hero. And so, this is the backdrop for the triumphal entry of Jesus into Jerusalem. And if we don't think about the way the world honors people, or the things that people in the world are fascinated with, then we aren't going to be able to understand Jesus' triumphal entry. This is by a painter called Oriente, and I liked it because it had both the cloaks and the palm branches in it. But what you got to know is that the triumphal entry for Jesus was political theater. It was a way to demonstrate that his way in the world is upside down. It's not the way we value things in this world. It was to send a message that his followers should never lord it over others, and that they would always be humble, that they would lend their cloaks in service of others. And I want you to consider these coats that are here on the pews today, which is a great reminder of the mission that God gives to us. And as we're here today, I hope that you touch these coats and you pray for these coats, but not just these coats, but the people who will wear them, because that's the kind of kingdom that Jesus commands us to be up and about. Think about the people who will be blessed next winter on a cold day when they have no coat. And it happens more often than you might think. Think about those people. Pray for these clothes that someone will wear. So the question today on Palm Sunday is, what will you lay at Jesus' feet? How will you prepare the way for the love of God and the kingdom that people were so enthusiastic for, because it was an alternative to the kingdoms of this world? Season of Lent is really important. It's really a great time for us to consider where our values are and what we're living for. And on Ash Wednesday, does anybody remember what we did with the palms? We burned the palms and we made some black gooey tar stuff, and we put crosses on your head. What did we say we put crosses on your head? Remember that you are dust, and to dust you shall return. It's a reminder that the season of Lent is about our mortality. And it culminates in Easter Sunday when we talk about the resurrection to a new life. And I thought it'd be kind of cool to remind you of what we did when this Lenten season began, because today is beginning the first day of Holy Week. So our Lenten journey is almost over. Now, I'll have you do the bold part in the middle, because this is what we said on Ash Wednesday. The season of Lent is a time within the church year to acknowledge that we are mortal. Lent awakens us to hope in God, whose steadfast love endures forever. As disciples of Jesus Christ, we are called to struggle against everything that leads us away from the love of God and neighbor. The Lenten disciplines of repentance, fasting, prayer, study, and works of love help us return to the steadfast love of God. During Lent, we confess our mortality, our limits, and our vulnerability, so that we might be transformed and become the new life God calls us to be. Triumphal entry. There's a Catholic priest named Richard Rohr, and he had this little thing, someone from this congregation posted it on Facebook. And on Palm Sunday, we declare that Jesus is Lord. Now, In the ancient world, that meant something different than it does to most Christians in our world today. It meant Jesus is Lord and Caesar is not. It meant we live by a different structure of values than the world around us lives by. We no longer live by glorifying people who kill in the military. We no longer glorify the condescension of the poor. We now include all people. We pray for a world of peace and justice. And Richard Rohr says, if Jesus is Lord, then Caesar is not. If Jesus is Lord, then the economy and the stock market are not. If Jesus is Lord, then my possessions, country, and job are not. If Jesus is Lord, then I am not. Today, Good Friday, we proclaim that Jesus is Lord because there are so many things in our world that will claim that place in our allegiance. On Maundy Thursday, hope you can make it at 7 o'clock, we have communion and we commemorate the Last Supper that Jesus had with his disciples. Now, I noticed that there was a typo in some of our stuff that went out, and it had an A in Maundy. It said Maunday on a Thursday, but it actually is Maundy, which is Latin for command. It's Command Thursday. And the command is from John 13:35. We always have to remember that on Maunday, Thursday. And they will know you are my disciples by... Think about the way that we handle Christianity and rules. Theology, sometimes. Righteousness, power, rhetoric, by our purity. By our clubs? Nope. By your love. That includes everyone. So, people all the time ask me, they go, well, what does your church believe? Now, I don't know, you ought to have some answer to that, because people are going to ask you that at some point in your life, your family members or your friends, so you should have a pretty good answer to that. One of my answers to that is, take a look at the front of our church and read the banner. Those are the values that keep us moving. Those are the values that we believe Jesus brought into this world as our Lord. And if you look them over, protect the environment. Yesterday we had a movie and a meal for Earth Day, and we saw some really terrible things happening to the earth. Protect the environment. What's become a large part of our mission? Care for the poor. Forgive often. Reject racism. Fight for the powerless. Share earthly and spiritual resources. Embrace diversity. Love God. Enjoy this life. You know, so often in Christianity we get the sense that you're not supposed to enjoy life. Did you ever notice that? That's part of what we believe in. Enjoy this life, some core values. And I almost think that the church functions better as a movement and not an institution. Because an institution has rules and a movement has to do with what's in your heart and how you unself-consciously rip branches off of a tree or take your coat off and throw it in the middle of the road to pave the way for someone else. Everything in this life requires faith. And that's something that's certain. It depends on what our faith is in. And when we risk ourselves for justice and for love, we learn that we can trust God and we can invest ourselves in another world that God is creating through us. That we don't have to live by the values of the culture that we live in. That we choose. We choose to have faith. We choose to be optimistic. We choose to look at life in a different way. So we have in the United Church of Christ, we haven't shown this in a while. It used to be, some of you might remember when we first started doing PowerPoint, we always had that banner on the top or the bottom. Do you remember that? Because about 10 years ago, the whole saying of the United Church of Christ, the main saying was, never place a period where God has placed a comma. And that came from Gracie Allen, who was the wife of George Burns. And when his wife, Gracie, died, he was looking through some of the papers that she had left specifically for him after she died. And in her letter to him, she concluded with the phrase about life eternal, you should never place a period where God has placed a comma. And our worldly leaders place periods. Used to be, they would say, slavery is commanded in the Bible, period. But God had a comma. Revelation 21, pain, comma. Loneliness, comma. When Jesus raised Lazarus, he said, but wait, the story isn't over. Grief, comma. Death, comma. Any worldly trouble we have, comma. And it all comes down to breaking down those walls that we have to believe in the periods of our life. So this Good Friday, around 4 o'clock, we're going to be down on the square again with the Interfaith Partnership, and a number of our churches are participating. At 4 o'clock, we have music, and 3 pastors are going to speak. And in the past, we've handled different issues, and this year we're going to do Paul's Ephesians. Christ has broken down the dividing walls of hostility. And our theme is that when a wall falls, people celebrate. Think about the Berlin Wall. Think about all the walls that fall down between families. People celebrate. People like periods because they're neat. They don't require you to wonder or to stretch out or to grow your soul. You just do what you're told. Some religions, it is believe what I tell you to believe. And that's not faith. That's not you running out and being enthusiastic about the values that we stand for. And the gospel is written in your hearts. So if you ever wonder how Jesus tied justice and the resurrection together, you can find it in the comma. Because people have a tendency to put a period on everything. God is still speaking even about death. And Easter next Sunday is one big comma. So I hope you can see the gospel in Jesus' encounters along the way with people. A person like Nicodemus, who was timid about his faith. A woman who was a Samaritan, like the woman at the well. And we listen for God saying that the world's periods need to be handled with God's commas. God so loved the world is the message. The love of God compels us, Paul said. So the gospel is a series of stories of people who have been left out, who've been outsiders, to show us that Jesus brought the message of God's love to those who had been estranged. And they are the people who are cheering Jesus on as he goes into Jerusalem. So in all of our brokenness and all of our doubts about life and death, we greet Jesus with a great deal of enthusiasm. But we have to do it over the noise of the world, over the big triumphant arches and the war horses, to listen for a person who handled himself differently, who rode a donkey that had never been ridden before, with a ragtag bunch of people who had been healed by him. And you have to listen for God's voice that is still speaking that love. Read the banner. cheer Jesus on today. Consider what it is that you will grab to lay at Jesus' feet. And to consider how you are preparing the way in this world for the love of God.
As we continue our worship service, let us always remember that Jesus is the only Lord. And let us give humbly today so that this congregation can continue to lift that up here in this community. Let us give a portion of what God has so freely given to us. Take courage, friends. The way is often hard. The path is never clear. The stakes are very high. Take courage.